Men in Black is one of the most successful blockbusters from the 90s. It's a very entertaining sci-fi comedy and also a buddy cop movie that makes you legitimately care for its two leads, in huge part thanks to the great chemistry between Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith. Hell, its success was even crucial in establishing Will Smith as one of Hollywood's most reliable movie stars. Until, you know.
Uh-oh, Richard!
It's a really great movie that still holds up to this day, and at the time it was a huge financial and critical success that turned the movie into a franchise, with a subsequent tie-in animated series and several sequels. But, in all honesty, Men in Black always seemed to me like a franchise with a lot of untapped potential, since it's a concept that lends itself to a lot of storyline possibilities that could explore a huge variety of different genres and themes. This becomes even more apparent when you take a look at the Men in Black's original source material, since, in case you didn't know, the franchise originally started as a black and white indie comic book published by Malibu Comics, written by Lowell Cunningham, and unlike the MIB from the movies, in the comics they not only fight against aliens, but they also deal with other threats like demons, urban myths, cultists, and other types of supernatural threats in a much more brutal manner with a darker tone. Sony and Columbia Pictures took this interesting concept from an indie comic and used it as a basis for a more widely appealing comedy action movie with a lot of charm that became a huge success when it originally released. And just to put it into perspective, the first Men in Black had the highest grossing domestic box office within the US in 1997, and that's the same year that Titanic released, which was also insanely huge. Superhero and comic book movies might still be the most popular kind of blockbuster nowadays, but the genre took years and even decades to reach the bankability that it has today, and a lot of people tend to mention the success of some specific movies which paved the way for the uptake in comic book film adaptations. Movies like 2002's Spider-Man, 2000's X-Men, and 1998's Blade were all instrumental in giving movie studios the confidence in adapting comic book properties into big-budget films. But some people tend to forget or ignore the success of other comic book adaptations that also prove to Hollywood the huge potential that comics have if properly translated onto the big screen, like the first TMNT movie, Jim Carrey's The Mask, and, of course, 1997's Men in Black. All of these movies played a big part in giving movie studios the confidence in adapting more comic books, and proving that their concepts were capable of being critically and financially successful. The first film still really holds up to this day. It's a movie with a strong visual style that takes influence from 50s sci-fi and UFO iconography. Its fantastic use of CGI and practical effects makes it really admirable, especially for the time. J and K's characters were changed from the comic, but it was for the better in this case, since their more likable personalities are a better fit for this lighter comedic movie, and the performances by both Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones really elevate both roles, giving us a buddy cop duo with a genuine sense of chemistry in their banter, dialogue, and mannerisms. The problem with MIB as a franchise, though, is that every subsequent installment in the series was a failed attempt to try and recapture the charm and personality of the first film while completely failing at it. There's a term called sequelitis for movies that try to retread and copy what the previous installment did, but with worse execution, and this is something that the MIB films are very guilty of. For instance, the first movie is about an alien bug that arrives on Earth to track down and kill two disguised aliens who are members of the royal family of a galactic empire called the Arquillians, in order to steal from them a powerful item that would allow the evil bug to destroy the Arquillian Empire. The second movie is, again, about an evil alien that arrives on Earth in order to obtain a powerful item that was left by a royal alien princess from a planet called Sartha, and the evil alien wants to use the item to destroy the Sarthan Empire. In the third movie, Agent J has to time travel to the past in order to stop an evil alien from killing Agent K, and to prevent Earth to be invaded by an alien race called the Boglodites. In the fourth movie, the MIB are once again trying to stop an evil alien race called the Hive from invading Earth. So, not only does the Men in Black franchise limits itself to only using aliens as villains, but they also repeat literally the same plots about invasions, conflicts between different alien civilizations, and disguised aliens from royal families being assassinated in order to start a war. This all makes for a series that feels highly derivative of itself. Because, of course, as you can imagine, the similarities between these movies not only stop at their plots, they also repeat many different scenes and jokes as well.
Huh? Hey, what's this thing? Okay, just be calm. Just relax. Ooh, watch your head. We're in this room. What's this? Oh, it's lost. Oh, it's lost. Don't touch that.
Men in Black 2 is by far the most guilty of this, and it's probably the worst movie from the franchise in my opinion. As mentioned previously, it has a very similar plot to the first movie, but executed in a less competent way. This time, it has Agent J recruiting Agent K instead of the other way around, and K has all of his character development from the ending of the first film completely taken away from him. And Tommy Lee Jones just looked like he did not want to be on set. He looks like he absolutely did not give a shit and just wanted to check. It also feels exceedingly cartoonish. The first one was a comedy movie, but it still allowed itself to be serious and dark at times. But MIB 2 is completely over the top. They fight against aliens wide in the open streets with multiple normal civilians seeing it, and no one treats it like a big deal at all. Another big problem is that the sequel relies far too much on CGI. In the first movie, the aliens were done in a combination of CG and practical effects in a pretty balanced way that looked fantastic. But in MIB 2, they mainly used CGI for depicting the aliens, and it greatly added to the movie feeling cartoonish. MIB 3 luckily was much better, and it's actually the second best movie in the franchise after the first one. It's generally a pretty good movie in my opinion, although it does admittedly still feel derivative of past movies, since it's again about trying to stop an alien invasion, and its main villain has a past rivalry between them and Agent K, much like the main villain of the second movie. But it's still a good film overall. They went back to using a mix of CGI and practical effects, which gave the movie an awesome look. I especially like the main villain's design. Josh Brolin's performance as K was great and it really stole the show. He got down Tommy Lee Jones' mannerisms and cadence perfectly and had a really great chemistry with Will Smith. The emotional center of the story with K and J's relationship made the movie actually engaging, because at its core, this movie is about growing old. It's about reflecting on your life and being unsure if you ever truly connected with someone and regretting your decisions. So while the movie might not be groundbreaking or a masterpiece, it's still a good movie and overall a nice continuation of the first one. MIB International, though, was a mediocre attempt to revitalize the franchise. It isn't a totally bad movie, but it is highly unremarkable and forgettable. A lot of the original movie's charm was due to Will Smith's and Tommy Lee Jones' great chemistry that was genuinely funny and engaging. But in this one, Chris Hemsworth and, her, you know, fucking Valkyrie from the Thor movies, yeah, even though both actors have worked on previous films, they really don't have any kind of chemistry whatsoever. The MIB franchise, as they've established it so far, besides being a sci-fi action comedy, is also a buddy cop movie, and in that regard, MIB International pretty much failed. Also, some of you might remember the Men in Black animated series from the late 90s, and while I personally didn't grow up with it since I never catched it on TV as a kid, I have watched some episodes in preparation for this video and it's honestly a pretty good show. It has a great visual style, and while they also limit themselves to only showing the MIB fighting against aliens, they do come up with different plots and storylines that aren't just about trying to stop an invasion or a war between two different empires like in the movies. There's a lot more variety in the show's stories and it's something that I appreciate. So if you're a fan of the franchise and you've never seen the show, I do recommend that you check it out. So as we can see, MIB in the movies is a franchise that's been afraid of trying new ideas, and they have only tried to desperately replicate the ingenuity of the first movie. But as we mentioned in the beginning, Men in Black was actually pretty different from the OG black and white indie comics, since they were actually much darker and serious in tone. The movie treated the MIB in a tongue-in-cheek way that had fun with the concept while not taking it too seriously, with a lot of personality and comedy. But the OG comic presented the MIB as a very shadowy and sketchy government organization that no one should trust. They have total jurisdiction, total control, they kill both monsters and human beings alike. They search houses without a warrant, and do the ultimate invasion of privacy by erasing people's memories without their consent, and also being able to make them confess to anything and believe in anything. This is something that was adapted in the movie, but there it's presented as a light joke and something funny. In the comic, however, it's pointed out in a serious way that makes you uncomfortable, since when you really think about it, if an organization like the Men in Black actually existed in real life, it would be terrifying. And this is where the wasted potential of Men in Black as a franchise lies, its horror potential. Men in Black urban legends allegedly started in the mid-20th century as accounts of people being visited by strange government agents after they had reported UFO sightings. But over the years, the Men in Black have been mentioned in cases that go beyond just aliens. In an interview conducted when the original comic released in 1990, the creator of the MIB himself, Lowell Cunningham, said that he didn't want to limit himself to only using aliens because he felt it would get tiring and repetitive if it's done too much. So in the original miniseries, the MIB faced off against an occultist drug cult in issue 1, and then an alien that visited a farmer in issue 2, which served as a basis for the first movie. And in issue 3, they faced off against a demon that was summoned by accident after some kids were playing with an ancient artifact. And the MIB later also had another miniseries where they faced off against different varied monsters, not only aliens. I think that this is one of the few instances where making a darker, mature reboot of a franchise would actually be the smartest thing to do, not only because it would go back to the roots of the original source material, but also because it would allow for more story possibilities, and it could tap into current audiences' fascination with conspiracy theories of all kinds, and also their mistrust towards the government, given that ever since the boom of the internet, conspiracy theories have become much more common since 1997, and this is something the MIB franchise could and absolutely should tap into. They could easily create very interesting stories where they faced off against all types of threats, well beyond just aliens, and delving into other urban myths, cryptids, ghosts, demons, occultists, eldritch horrors, and many other possibilities. Even if they still choose to have the MIB only dealing with aliens like all of the movies have done, they could still innovate on the concept by presenting it under a horror perspective and a darker tone. That would make that potential new story feel very different than all the previous films. Another reason why a mature, darker Men in Black movie would make sense is because Men in Black as a franchise isn't really popular with younger audiences nowadays, especially after the 2019 soft reboot failed. In reality, it's only remembered by people who watched the movies when they originally released, or by those kids who grew up watching them and are now adults, and it would be a fresh new way of reintroducing the Men in Black that would spark interest in people. It's also kind of odd to make a comedy out of an inherently dark concept. If the Men in Black existed in real life as a secret government agency, it would be terrifying. And this is something that was addressed in the OG comic. The protagonist of the comic was a normal DEA agent who was undercover, investigating a case that needed the involvement of the Men in Black. And much like in the movie, this normal officer ended up meeting a veteran Men in Black named Kay to solve the case. The difference is that Kay in the movie is genuinely a good person that sincerely wants to help people. But in the comic, Kay is a completely awful person that has no problem in killing both monsters and regular human beings. He actually takes joy in using his power, and erasing people's memories and manipulating them, just to illustrate how completely different the characters' morals are from one another. In the movie, Kay gives the regular police officer a choice whether he wants to get involved with the organization, and he transparently makes him realize that if he does accept to join, his life would change forever. He gives him a card and tells him that if he truly wants to join, he should come back later on his own will. In the comic, however, Kay pretty much kidnaps the normal officer and purposefully almost gets him killed by using him as bait. While Kay did technically save his life, by the time he regained consciousness, he was already reported as dead. In the movie, they also erased his information, his fingerprints, and all records of his existence. But the difference is that in the movie, it's a choice that the rookie officer made. While in the comic, Kay gives the officer the choice to join the MIB, but without fully explaining all that would entail, and he would still manipulate him into almost being killed. This made for a completely different dynamic in the comic than in the movie, and it could potentially be very interesting to see on screen. Imagine a movie like Training Day but with Men in Black. It could be pretty interesting. The way I see it, if Sony opted to revive the MIB franchise, they have 3 routes they could go in. First, they could make a straightforward action comedy in the same vein as the first movie that attempts to recapture its spirit. Basically what every MIB movie since the original tried to do. Second, they could do a full-on comedy instead of an action movie, like the planned crossover movie with 21 Jump Street that Sony was considering making, which could honestly be pretty fun. And the third option they could attempt is to make a mature reboot just like many other franchises have tried. which could also fail, but given that the very origins of Men in Black as a franchise started as a dark concept, if they do it right with a solid, well thought out script and a team that believes in this vision, I honestly think they can make the greatest Men in Black movie we have never seen. And it doesn't even need to have a full R rating, since movies like The Batman are able to have a dark tone without being R-rated. Personally, my dream idea for a new Men in Black movie, as I said, would be a darker horror story that presents MIB closer to how the original comic did, showing them as a shady government organization that violates people's rights and holds insanely dark secrets. Imagine a movie that takes inspiration from the recent stories of people who worked in the US government that have spoken out about their experiences with UFOs. Imagine a story about the MIB secrets leaking out into the general public thanks to a whistleblower inside the government, and they assign J and K to kill the whistleblower. Maybe the characterizations for J and K could be closer to the comics, where K was depicted as a bad person who abuses his power, and J was more morally righteous. They could eventually start fighting each other, with K wanting to kill the whistleblower and J trying to save him. It could be a story about an MIB agent escaping from the organization and exposing the horrible truth because it had finally consumed his consciousness. Either way, what MIB as a franchise really needs are new ideas and genuinely fresh and interesting concepts. All of the sequels had issues with feeling repetitive and derivative, and all I can remember is the quote from the writer and creator of the original comics, where he said that he chose not to only limit himself to aliens and UFO stories because it could potentially end up feeling repetitive. And that really is something that ended up happening. I just find it silly to limit the franchise to only one topic when it could explore all kinds of stories. Just like the comic where they fought against occult drug cults and demons, they could also fight cryptids like Mothman. They could face threats more grounded in reality like serial killers. They could do a lot of things really, they just have to put some effort and be creative about it. So yeah, in my opinion, the way the franchise can truly make a comeback is by using truly fresh new ideas. Given that every single MIB sequel failed because they felt like rehashes of old ideas, and they repeated the same tropes and elements far too much. While in contrast, the first film succeeded because it was a fresh new concept for a movie, adapted from a creative, obscure indie comic that played with and tapped into people's fascination with conspiracy theories and their distrust of government agencies. So if Columbia or Sony really want to keep Men in Black alive and relevant as a franchise, what they really need are genuinely exciting and new concepts. But that's only my opinion. What do you think though? Would you like to see a new Men in Black movie? What kind of story would you like to see from a new film? Are you also tired of only seeing aliens and the movies feeling so repetitive? I obviously would love for Men in Black to make a good quality comeback, and I'm sure that I'm not the only one. So let's keep the conversation going. Comment below your thoughts, and as always, thank you so much for watching.